drive is sort of eco-consciousness. I mean, I just came back from overseas presenting on sort of the environment. Let's say the drive is we need to be more ecologically aware. We do. We have very limited resources. We have to make sure that we're conscious of how we treat the earth, right? Some people don't need to be as fanatical, and I'm not a fanatic about it, but I mean, it's the earth, you know what I'm saying? I was a kid, and you know, I'm pre-video games, so we used to go outside and have fun and, you know, run around, you know, and swim in the river and all that crap. Right? I want my kids to at least have that opportunity, and their kids to have that opportunity, so the earth is very, very important to me. The idea is, this correlation is an if-then correlation. If population growth increases, then the likelihood for water quality decreases. I'm going to take this and rephrase it. You don't have to worry about the rules of, you know, you don't have to worry about the rules that apply to stuff like this, the appropriation of demorgans or what have you. You don't need to know technical, formal ways of transforming, you know, logical claims. That's not important at all. What's important is restating this in a form that will assume the disjunctive syllogism, right? I need to assume the form of the disjunctive syllogism. So what I say is, I'm trying to conserve water. Not only am I trying to conserve water as far as quantity, I have the dual task of also making sure that the water that's left is clean water, right? So it's not just the conservation of water. Now the analysis is much more complicated, because there's a simultaneous pressure to conserve the amount of water that's left, but to make sure that the water that's left is clean water. You don't want to have water that's left, but all the remaining water has decreased quality because we have such a large population. So there's two things that need to be done, and I'm not doing this. Environmental scientists need to figure this out. I'm just doing a logic lecture. So either we attempt to regulate population growth. Why would we need to regulate population growth? Because we want to make sure that water quality is the best that it can be. Either we attempt to regulate population growth, or we attempt to regulate their behavior, since we recognize that increased population growth directly affects both the levels of available water supply, which I said before, quantity, and possibly, and I put possibly there specifically to affirm the weakness of this connection as cited by researchers, right? And possibly the levels of contamination within the water supply. So you can see that the goal is to make sure that we keep as much of the water that we can, and the water that we have is clean. How do we go about doing that? If there's a connection between population growth and water quality, well, you try to regulate population growth, right? If you can prevent the population from growing, if this connection is formally established, and you can prevent the population from growing, well, then you would increase the quality in water, arguably. But that seems a little spooky. Like, how are you going to do that? I mean, people are going to breed, and that it's a possibility, but, you know, how do you go about regulating population growth? That seems really difficult. Or, and not that the alternatives are better either, or you can attempt to regulate the behavior of the population, which seems more likely. So you have an idea of where the disjunctive syllogism is going to lean in terms of the next argument, which I haven't formalized yet. Right? So either you regulate population growth, you sort of suppress population growth. Insofar as you suppress population growth, what's the effect of suppressing population growth? Well, it would inverse the relationship, right? If this now decreases, this might increase. Okay, but regulating population growth, that doesn't seem practical. Or we could, and the only reason I'm doing this is because I want you to be prepared for the disjunctive syllogism in section 4. Or we could regulate the behavior of the population. We know that the population is going to expand. What we need to do is regulate and transform the way in which people behave. It's their behavior that is resulting in the contamination of the water. It's not the mere number of people, and I don't want to flesh this out too much because I want to save this for section 4. It's not the sheer number of people that directly correlates to decreased water quality. Definitely it is the sheer number of people that leads to the decrease in water quantity. Quantity is directly correlated to the number of people, but quality doesn't necessarily have to be. And that's the genius of this. That's the genius of the argument, right? That's the genius of the argument, right? I'm not a physical scientist, but I would tend to agree with the citation that said this relationship isn't as direct as it seems. I tend to believe, despite the fact that I arbitrarily came up with this, the second of the two citations, I tend to believe that it's more, and I'll put a little bit out there, that this connection is there, it's an established connection, but it's more complicated than saying, yes, you have more people and thus your water quality turns to crap. It's not, I would argue, obviously, it's not just the case, and this is like, now we're in the middle of like real rigorous argumentation and logic, right? That applies to something that people are doing research on right now. So this is definitely applicable. That's undeniable. Yeah, it does, I mean, think about it. It doesn't, the sheer magnitude of people is going to affect quality. I see how it affects quantity because we need water to survive. Thus, the more people we have, the more water is needed to stabilize that population. So quantity, for sure. Quality, no, quality becomes, the contamination of water becomes a product of our behavior in relationship to the quantity that we have. Right? So quality is affected behaviorally. So we can decrease the number of people, and sure, that might, disjunctive, that might increase water quality, but if we transform the ways in which people behave in relationship to the environment, how they behave in relationship to the earth, they're not pouring out their motor oil into the groundwater supply. They're not over fertilizing. They're not contaminating streams and rivers with the pollution. Well, that's a behavioral transformation, so that we can set up the disjunctive implication here, and we have. So, despite the fact that this is only a sentence, see how much is embedded in this sentence already. It's going to take you a lot of time to be able to do this, right? I understand that I have a rather advanced understanding of logic and the application and appropriation of logic to rhetoric and argument and thought, but I want you to understand, the reason why I just went through all of that is to understand how much is embedded in this sentence. The sentence is not constructed because I wanted to talk about, either or. It had to be constructed in terms of either or because I knew what I was going to be using next as disjunctive syllogism. And I also know the form of disjunctive syllogism. I'll talk about this more in section 4. So to read that last bit again now and listen keenly so that you can see sort of conceptually what I've done. In attempts to decrease the consumption and pollution of our water supplies, either we attempt to regulate population growth, or we attempt to regulate their behavior. Since we recognize that increased population directly affects both the levels affects both the levels of available water supply. We don't need the article. Since we recognize that increased pollution directly affects both the levels of available water supply and possibly the levels of contamination within those water supplies, right? So, I mean, and then what I do in the next page, 19 and 20, which I'm not going to read, is we've derived an entire page. This is like a page in the top of another page that we were able to generate using hypothetical syllogism. This is all generated from HS, right? So we use hypothetical syllogism and we derived and generated this. Again, I take a tremendous amount of pride. I'm not even on front. I take a tremendous amount of pride in the fact that it took a while to formalize how I was going to approach it, and I didn't think I would be able to sort of take it out of my head and put it on paper and then instruct others on how to do this. But I take a tremendous amount of pride in the fact that we're almost done, right? This is pretty big. This is pretty big to be able to codify it, solidify it in terms of a pedagogical device that now can be replicated and augmented itself. Like, it's out now, right? This rather cognitively intuitive process is formalized now and is something that is teachable, which is like I'm good now. I'm good, right? I'm really good. So I mean, that's where we are. The implication is the implication, and I feel like I want to just do one last little bit because I don't want to quite end yet, but I think I've explained it. I think I've explained it. I know I've explained it, but the idea is, what I was thinking is, I wanted to stress one last time, right, that the implication isn't a part of the rule of inference that preceded it. It's never. The implication that you posit at the end of the rule of inference is not affiliated with the rule of inference. This is hypothetical syllogism. The implication assumes the form of the next rule of inference that you're going to use. If you know that the next rule of inference that you're going to use is going to be hypothetical syllogism, modus tollens or modus ponens, then the implication assumes the form of the conditional. If this happens, then this happens, and you just need one sentence, 2 sentences for the implication, which you will then deconstruct right beneath it. If you know that the implication is going to result in what I want to apply this new rule, being disjunctive syllogism, sort of either or, then after I use my rule of inference, which preceded it, I need to make sure that I construct my language after the rule has been applied in such a way that I introduce literally the words, or at least the concept of this selective comparison, right? Either this happens or this happens. Insofar as I do that, and I was able to do it in maybe a sentence or two, I can then deconstruct that more by the appropriation of a new rule of inference in section 4, which will be the disjunctive syllogism. After the disjunctive syllogism, we're going to do the conjunction, and we'll be effectively done. And then we'll see where this all has taken us, right? So we'll do a sort of a recap. And for me, it's just tremendously cool to finally, one, have the time to do it, but two, to figure out me methodologically, how to do it so that you could learn from it, right? I had to sort of figure out the system in which I could present this information, but now that it's done, it's just a really cool feeling to know that there's only 2 more left and we're done. And they won't take long. Disjunctive syllogism won't be nearly as long as the hypothetical syllogism. In conjunction, I could probably do in 30 minutes tops an hour. So we probably have about another 2 hours left, tops maybe, in the lecture series, and then we're going to put this one to bed, right? And so that's cool. I like having series that are completed. I have a lot that are sort of open, but it's good to, bang it out in a week on the grind. All right, anyway, so that's the end of that. I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell. Again, I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my videos. Have a good day.